Hello everyone, thank you for joining us yet again for another B&H livestream event. Today we're looking at something very exciting. This is Sony's brand new Alpha One II and a new lens too, the FE 28 to 70 millimeter f2 G Master. Very exciting gear. We've all had a chance to work with it today. We got some excellent panelists with us here. So we're just going to have them introduce themselves and then we'll get right into some questions. So let's begin.
Hi, I'm Brian Smith. I'm a Sony artist of imagery, and I shoot a lot of portraiture and occasionally action as well.
Very cool. I'm sure the new lens in particular is. We'll get to it.
Yeah,
Hi, I'm Melissa Grew. I'm a wildlife photographer and conservationist, and a Sony artisan of imagery.
I do it. Mike Bubalo with Sony Electronics, product manager for all things imagery, and excited to be here today with these amazing artists in B&H.
Thank you for joining us, both of you. All right, so before we begin, let's just go over some really key specs here for both the camera and the lens. We have, kind of building off the original version 1, we have 50.1 megapixels, there's 8K video up to 30 FPS, and of course we have 30 FPS continuous shooting, which was a huge thing. It still is a huge thing, but really what comes together here is an improvement in all the ergonomics and the functionality. We have things like auto subject recognition, which we're going to get into. The in-body stabilizer has been massively improved here, 3 stops, which is pretty wild, up to 8.5 now. And it has a lot of the same AI processing functionality and the design of the body itself taken from the A9 III, which we saw a few months back. It is now here, so we're seeing this awesome bridging of technology. There's some new video features as well, which we'll get to, and this is very interesting, because I know people love these things. We have a 4-axis LCD screen. So anyway, let's, just for the lens, I think it speaks for itself. It's a constant f2, 28 to 70. It is in a very all-around focal length range, as I'm sure some of you know now, but that f2 really does deliver, let me tell you. So anyway, let's just jump right into this. I want to start with what people got to do, or their just initial impressions about the camera and the lens, excuse me. So I guess let's just go down and start with Brian.
Well, I had about 2.5 weeks with the camera, which was ideal. A lot of times we get these things 2 or 3 days before an announcement, so I love that much time. So I shot surfing in Venice Beach, people out by the water. I also shot with it in Miami and New York. So I really got to put the camera through its paces.
Nice. Lucky man, I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time with it yet. I did get the camera yesterday, and I've spent some time with it, and then I also got to have some great discussions with you about all the features. And I mean, for me, it's the ultimate camera, because for me it marries all the features I love about the A9 III and the original Alpha One. So
and you're a shooter of both, correct?
Yes, I shoot with both. And you know, when the A9 III came out, it had this incredible AI that I felt really far surpassed the original A1. And so I'd be out in the field with both of those bodies, and I would often reach for the A9 III. But then I would find that I was missing the resolution a bit, because I photograph birds and other wildlife, and often you really have to crop, you know, because you can't get very close at times. And so I really was kind of missing that resolution. And so for me, this sort of marries those two. I think I saw a title yesterday, someone's called it, it's as if A1 and A9 III had a baby. I mean, for me, this is sort of the ultimate for my work.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to get into exactly why some of that is that's a very correct description. Because we have things like the pre-recording and the speed boost button, for example, which we'll get into. So, Mike, what did I miss?
I mean, so far, you guys have all kind of really hit the nail on the head, because the camera really is an evolution of what the Alpha One is. And the Alpha One, like you said, Jake, is a really great camera already. Like, it's a delightful camera that has 50 megapixels, 30 frames per second, and we just kind of enhanced those features, right? So we enhanced it with in-body stabilization, better in-body stabilization, with the pre-capture, with subject recognition AI. So it's just is an evolution of what we're able to do with the Alpha One system. And it's like what both of you said. It's like the 9 Mark III and the Alpha One had a baby, and this is what it is.
Right.
Because the 9 Mark III I mean, that was revolutionary. It changed the industry, right? So, and that's, I think, what some people expected here, but this is a Mark II, right? So we had to tailor our expectations already. The Alpha 1 was already a really incredible camera, but taking all that technology that we learned on the 9 Mark III, the ergonomics, the pre-capture, the speed boost, and then bringing that to a 50 megapixel sensor and a camera like the Alpha 1, I think really does kind of redefine what the flagship camera is, and to me makes the most well-rounded camera that I would like to shoot with, so.
Would you say that that was the overall thought process going in, or was it more like, what do we feel the A1, the original version, was missing that we now can do?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, 3.5 years, right, since the
Right.
Alpha 1 came out.
That's hard to believe.
And, yeah, right. So, and so much has come out since the Alpha 1, like with the 7R5, the 9 Mark III, and we've learned so much even from the ZV cameras. Our entire system of cameras, whether it's Cinema Line, whether it's ZV cameras, Alpha cameras, so much technology and user benefits have come from all those cameras that we wanted to put into this camera. We don't just save everything for our flagship camera like Brian and I were having a conversation before, but we can put those feature sets like in a ZV-E1, and then you'll start seeing those trickle up and put all that technology in our latest camera. And you see that on this camera with the benefits of AI, things like auto framing, things like framing stabilizer that we took from the ZV line, things like pre-capture we took from the 9 Mark III, the LCD screen that we took from the 7R Mark V. So all the things that we've introduced over the last 3.5 years really culminate to this flagship camera.
Amazing, amazing. So we had some time with it as well. I would say we were able to, luckily, be able to do a little bit of video work outside and also some studio portraiture and product photography work, and it really runs the gamut because there is just so much in this camera. And I think we're at a very interesting point right now in general with camera technology where you really struggle to find anything that you can't shoot. It's really difficult. In terms of resolution and speed, it's all there. And so, for me at least, it kind of begs the question of how does this change, I guess, the role of photographers and videographers? What is in their toolkit? What is in their bag? What are they using? What can they do that they maybe couldn't have done 5-10 years ago with something like this? It's an open question, I feel, that I'd like to get some insights on.
Well, I think it really brings a lot of the technology together, and I think more than any other reason, this is considered the flagship because it does everything really well. And I think the big difference from the original one is that camera did did everything, and now this does everything that much better. So that all of the technology that Sony's introduced in the last 3.5 years is kind of a reminder of how much Sony rolls out constantly, not just the flagship, but every time a feature's ready, it will make it into the next body. They don't sit on things for 3.5 years and go wait till this comes out. It's like as soon as a feature's ready to be there, it's whether it's the top of the end camera or something else, it keeps adding to the technology. So I think it's a nice example of the camera that can be your camera to do everything. You don't need to have the separate video camera or the separate one for stills. It does everything very, very well.
That's interesting you say it because separate cameras. So I actually wanted to bring that over to Melissa. We had talked earlier, this is off camera, but so you shoot the original A1 and A9 III as well. What do you find would be the bridging point that you would maybe be able to rely less on having two separate bodies as opposed to just one? Like what in your workflow, especially with wildlife,
I
what
mean,
do you
I
find yourself
realize
reaching
that
for?
as a professional wildlife photographer, I do have the ability to have a couple of, amazing cameras, and not everybody may be able to have that. But I will say that I will really want to keep the A9 III in my kit. I think I will mostly lean on the A1 II because the AI now is so incredible. So for me, it's the perfect combination, the new camera, resolution and speed and AI. But I will say that there are times, when you have a really fast-moving subject or
Of course.
really elusive subject, when you can't do a do-over. You've got your one chance. It's very fleeting. And now you've got pre-capture on the A1. So you can go like a second back in time and sort of capture that bird as
Right.
it's just beginning to open its wings to fly off the branch, or that animal as it's leaving its cavity nest or den. These moments that we can't predict out in nature,
Yeah.
but that we can actually go back and seize frames from before we fully press the shutter is to me, an incredible asset. And then the boost button, you can program it for 10 frames a second, 20 frames per second, 30. But with the A9 III, if I really want to make sure I'm getting, a full range of poses, I've got some incredible bird in flight, I may opt for that because I do get 120 frames per second with that pre-capture,
Yeah.
all in RAW,
Right,
which is incredible. So it's a wonderful workhorse for me as well. But it's like a friend of mine, Mark Smith, who many people may know of. He's got a lot of followers. He's a bird photographer. And he just said to me yesterday, he had the camera in hand for a couple of weeks, and he said, this camera does everything. It does everything exceptionally well, and it's going to be my go-to for stills and video.
That's amazing.
And this guy knows video as well as stills, so I felt like that was really well said. So, yeah, I feel like the A1 II is mostly going to serve all my purposes, and I have the luxury of being able to lean on the A9 III as well for those really key pivotal moments where I want as many frames as possible, so I have that maximum choice.
Right. I think it's actually, just for the audience, in case they're wondering, the speed boost was taken from the A9 III. That's correct.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I think in a lot of cases, especially now, it's really easy to do the whole spray and pray type approach to photography, which I'm definitely not encouraging. Having the ability, of course, is useful, but that gives you a certain level of, I guess, filtration over your own instinct to maybe just go full 30 or 120 the whole time, and instead only do it when you need to. It's really nice to see that. Actually, so that kind of brings me back to you, Mike. The decision to use the A9 III's body, is that sort of like a bigger unification effort?
I think so. I mean, because when the 9 Mark III came out, for years and years and years, one thing that Sony does really well is get feedback from professionals. We're at the Olympics, we're at games, we're with wildlife photographers, we're with our artisans, we're with customers, we listen to feedback. And it's always, or condo trip, things like that, we're always trying to figure out what would just make their overall experience better. And the body was a very long time in the making with like prototypes and having people test things out. So I think the 9 Mark III body was that culmination of all those years of research. And you can see the body's always evolving, right? Because in a sense, like our body production is still kind of new. You saw it with the 7 series and the Mark IIs and the Mark IIIs, the Mark IVs, even Mark Vs. So I think the 9 Mark III was really kind of our best body yet. The best grip, the more comfortable shutter button layout.
Yep.
I think it gives you a little bit more comfort for your day-to-day use, more custom buttons, and a little bit more flexibility with dials and stuff. So it just made sense for it to be on the Alpha 1 Mark II. So it just, I think right now the 9 Mark III and the 1 Mark II are far and away the best bodies that we've ever had in terms of ergonomics and layout. So
I sat down with a number of the product designers
Yeah.
at Kondo actually, and that's one thing we discussed. And one thing I said is like the A9 Mark III,
yeah,
stop. You've got
Yeah,
the body.
chef's
You've
kiss.
figured it out.
Yeah.
You've done it. Don't keep tweaking
can't
it.
improve.
It's got everything. Like
Yeah.
the grip, the ergonomics fits wonderfully. They've increased the size of the buttons on
Yeah.
it. So if you're a photographer working out in the cold with gloves on, you
Yep.
can access them. And then tilt screen, they finally nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
For
was
access.
the one of the things that I loved with the A7R Mark V when
Yep.
it came out is if I'm doing portraits vertically, I can flip it up and have the flip screen in a vertical position.
Yeah.
So,
Like so?
At this point, it works. It is so great that it's like,
yeah. I
stay there for a while and incorporate this and everything.
now they're asking for feedback. I'm like, honestly, I don't know what I
Yeah,
would change.
stop.
So it's
Yeah,
pretty good.
you got it.
Yeah, for wildlife photography, like often when we're on safari, we'll drop the camera just out the window. We really want to get those super low portraits of animals, especially as they're walking towards us. And so for me to be able to do like a vertical So I can this new articulation is really enables us to do those sorts of things, you know, because it just goes every which way.
And I still love the fact that we didn't make a unibody camera, so to speak. I think that's something that's important to discuss as well, that we kept the small form factor with the addition of being able to have it be more modular with a nice grip that has the same exact form factor in terms of buttons and custom buttons on the grip itself. So that way you can choose what type of shooting scenario you want, what type of ergonomics you want, because sometimes you don't want something that's bigger, sometimes you don't want something, you want something that's as small, as light as possible, but still have the flagship experience and no, you know, other additional features are added when you add the grip except for 2 batteries and a little bit better grip. So I really appreciate that they didn't go to that unibody approach, which, you know, of course, have always been a discussion, and we've always asked photographers what you feel like.
There's always people who are like, well, I want the big body, or I don't feel like I'm doing this. Like, you put the grip on and you've got
big
that.
Body,
but,
small body, big body.
But, you know, I'll tell you, there's a lot of times when I'm traveling where the lighter weight and smaller size, and frankly, I love when I'm traveling that the camera doesn't scream out that, look, here's a $6,500 camera, look at it. It's like, I'd love it to the fact that it is small and unobtrusive.
Yeah.
It does. It is pretty, like, I don't want to say nondescript because it has a certain look. There's definitely a look to an alpha camera, but it blends in. It blends in really nicely. And especially if you're doing any kind of street photography work or something where you need to really like be very low key about your presence there. I imagine especially if you're doing wildlife, you don't want to. You probably have bigger lenses, though. Is what I'm.
Yeah,
my guess.
I usually work with a 600 millimeter, often with a teleconverter on, or the 2-600, and I actually prefer to have a hefty feeling to my
Balances
camera,
out a
and I
little.
also really like the battery power that I get from.
That makes sense.
The battery grip. So I really always have the battery grip. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the way it feels.
For video work, because we were shooting with it last week. Yes, the LCD really came in handy for that because we shot basically as run and gun as it gets. We didn't use any like real support gear. We didn't have a gimbal, for example. We did consider it, but we also wanted to kind of just see what the stabilizer did on its own. It really held up, like I gotta say. Like, and you just combine that with the LCD, and you can shoot at these oblique angles that you probably could never do before. 8.5 stops of correction, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But let's actually talk about the lens for a minute, because I really want to move on to that. It's, I think, a very interesting sweet spot in terms of zoom range, optics. Brian, I actually wanted to ask you, you got to use the lens too, right? Yeah. So 28 to 70, obviously very close to the 24 to 70 coveted range, but you get that extra stop in there. And personally, I thought it made a huge difference. I think it doesn't sound like it would, but it kind of it is. How do you feel about the idea of it replacing primes for you?
I think that's something that Mike brought up that I think is a great valid point, where a lot of times I would have 2.8 zooms and then you know, 1 or 2 1.4s in a kit that I travel with, like either a 50 1.4 or maybe even the 50 1.2, just for that. Times when I wanted a little less depth of field, and I think you know, going to f2, you're so close to that, and it on top of that, it really has the feel of one of the Sony G Master Primes. I was comparing it to, I came up with the 50 1.2 with me, and I put the two together, and it's like it's kind of basically the same heft and weight, and you know, the barrel size of that. So that's a good approximation, where if you're used to that, it's similar. And one of the things that they did that I really love, possibly because they limited it 28 to 70, is this is how much it
noticed
zooms
that.
as you go out. And I think a lot of times, if you're used to on the 24 to 70, it really extends quite a bit.
It has a bit of more throw, right?
Where this is a very short throw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like the balance doesn't change at all. So if somebody's on a gimbal, it's not something where suddenly the gimbal's misbalanced as they change it. So I would think, in addition to being a beautiful lens for stills and portrait, this is an ideal lens for video, because you know, you can use that. That's a very useful range at f2 without having to rebalance every time you zoom the lens out.
I saw some of your photos before, actually. There were the surfing photos.
Yeah.
Was that with that lens as well?
Oh, no,
No?
No, the surfing was with a 300-2.8 and a
Oh, okay.
1.4
okay.
converter.
I,
So
I didn't
it's
get
like,
a close look.
Yeah.
I should have realized. Of any of the samples you gave us, do any of them feature the lens by chance?
No, I didn't get my
That's okay.
hands on this lens until
Just figured it out.
yesterday when we came here. They were in much shorter supply than the
Yeah,
bodies.
yeah.
But I did get to shoot with it a lot yesterday to get a feel for it. But you know, I think the great thing that Sony has really done is in designing the lenses, they've really been future-proofing a lot of these things. Where obviously the 300-2.8 G Master is a pretty recent lens, but really, like every lens that I shot with can keep up with, not just keep up with 30 frames a second of the body, but something Mike pointed out in his presentation, the camera refocuses and adjusts exposure 120 times a second. So even when it's shooting 30 frames a second, it's refocusing and recalibrating exposure 4 times between every frame. So it's not one of those where it goes 30 frames a second, but it locks it down. No, it's in between each frame. It's constantly recalibrating.
Right. And obviously the lenses need to be designed to accommodate focusing at such speed and such frequency.
And that's one of the things that Sony's done so well is with the XD linear focus. It's not like some brands that still use rotational stepping motors in their lenses. It's having the immediacy of a lens that's designed to keep up with, you know, well, we know it keeps up at 120
Even 240
calculations, but it's probably beyond that. You know, Sony a lot of times drops these things where, ooh, now we can do more. We didn't tell you.
Right.
And that's the idea of this lens, right? Is to make a lens that's a constant aperture f2. We weren't the first ones to come out with it, but now that we do have it, we wanted to make it, I like to say, I mean, it really is without compromise. We have a image quality that doesn't rely on electronic compensation, right? So we have unbelievable image quality and sharpness all the way to the corners, but it's also extremely soft and beautiful in the background defocus. But we also have the lens to be designed for video and for high-end stills, being able to track at 240 frames per second in video with 4 of our most advanced sensors. For video, as I'm sure you saw, there's very little focus breathing.
I was just going to get into it.
Yeah, so it's just, to me, it's one of the most perfect lenses that I've ever shot. And it's just, I love the versatility of a zoom. Maybe it's, and I do love primes, but sometimes it's nice to just leave the house with just one lens.
Right.
And now that I can do that with the zoom and get that look, like you said, one stop makes a big difference. One stop is double the amount of light. One stop is a lot bigger separation between your subject and your background, and it does give you that prime lens look and feel. And it's just been magnificent to play with.
And I love that they managed to bring it in more than a pound lower than the other 28 to 70 f2
nice.
that's on the market. So it's like to do all of this stuff, have virtually no focus breathing, very little extension as you zoom out, but then also save half a kilo on the weight.
Under a kilogram, they said it couldn't be done. So. Yeah.
And the body is also lighter than the original A1, correct?
The body's slightly lighter. It's I
Slightly
think
lighter.
like a couple ounces lighter than the original A1, while also making the grip a little bit bigger. So it does that is a pretty nice thing to have as well. So
I wanted to kind of connect this a little bit to video since you had brought it up. Yes, I can confirm it does not have much of any focus breathing, which is really nice to see. We had a couple of unintentional instances where I found that out because, you know, in a more cinematography approach, you want to usually go manual focus if you can. But I had it in auto a bunch of times, and the shot would change, the subject would leave the frame, and then, of course, the camera went back out into the distance to capture the horizon. And yeah, I mean, it was seamless. It's really seamless how it changes focus. And on top of that, I think it's just worth mentioning, like a lot of the more recent Sony lenses, it is declickable. And we were committed. I was determined to keep at an f2 as much as I possibly could. We had an ND filter on that thing the whole time. And it's just really nice, the smoothness of the bokeh on that. But video on the camera itself. So we're still at 8K 30, 4K 120. looks great. It functions perfectly. The autofocus is just as effective. But there are some new things here. I don't want to forget them. I know key was LUT input.
Yep, being able to
So
import
I actually
16 LUTs.
didn't realize, because it's been a while, I've forgotten that LUT input wasn't on the original A1.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how much more capable this actually is in a cinematography context. Was there an even bigger push to just make this everything?
Yeah, again, like we just wanted to put what we have into the camera, right? So, and the only way that we can do that is with hardware, with having that designated AI processing unit, being able to have now subject recognition, of course, for video the same way you do for stills, and then being able to have that auto framing, framing stabilizer, even dynamic active mode stabilization now, where you combine the in-body stabilization with electronic stabilization, but then also including the things that we learned on the Alpha 9 III, like being able to have importable 16 imported user LUTs. So that way, exactly what you see on your screen at home and what you build at home, you can then see it that way in the camera through the viewfinder or through the LCD screen. Even things like shot marks. So like while you're recording, you can have more advanced way of creating your shot marks. So if you create a shot mark, not only will it make the mark, but it'll also create a full res, of whatever you're shooting the video at, still image, and put it into your still image folder. There's other ways of importing the shot marks and doing things. So it just, everything that we could throw at it in terms of a video standpoint is there. And people forget, I think, how good the 8K is on the original Alpha 1. That
Yeah,
it's just
no, I remember,
so
I
nice.
remember.
It's just full width of the sensor, no line skipping, no pixel binning, full pixel readout. It's just stunning 8K video and we haven't even talked about how fast the sensor is too, even though it's not quite as fast as the 9 Mark III being a global shutter, but the readout speed of the sensor for video is just incredibly fast, one of the fastest out there.
I noticed that when we were doing a lot of like whip pans
Yeah.
across. We shot on the Brooklyn Bridge, and so we were capturing a runner, and as he's going, I'm following him. So, and I'm looking to see for that, distortion that you might want to avoid. And no, it looked very clean.
Yeah.
The other thing that was actually remarkable, since you mentioned just the 8K itself being as detailed as it is, we cross-cut it with 50 megapixel still images. Obviously, they were downscaled,
Of course,
but we were essentially creating the shot two ways. We were creating the shot like a long straight ahead running shot on a 300 millimeter with video and then with stills. And you can tell, of course, which is which because there's motion blur characteristics to that, and the shutter speed's way different on the stills. But detail-wise, it was honestly really close, and it's like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
Especially when you're running it at a full 30 FPS in stills, because then you're comparing. Yeah, it was hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah.
It's crazy how detailed it could be. And then, am I missing anything with video?
Video, I mean, there's little things, like, well, to some people it might not be little things, but being able to do now 1/24th of a second, 1/48th of a second for your 24p workflow.
Right,
You can set the camera to that. But overall, I mean, the foundation of what the video was on the Alpha 1 is here with a lot of those, I don't want to say minor, but some of those updates that we've learned over the last 3.5 years are in here as well. So.
Great. Let's move on to some questions. We actually have some coming in right now. So this is probably an easy one. What will happen to the original A1?
So that's a good question because the original Alpha 1 is staying in the lineup. It's already on a big promotion, so $1,000 off. I don't know how long we want this video to last, but it'll continue to exist, and I think it'll offer a lot of people the ability to get into the Alpha 1 system and be able to utilize that beautiful 50 megapixel sensor and be able to have that 30 frames per second at a much lower price point than the Alpha 1 Mark II. So the Alpha 1 isn't going anywhere. It'll stick around for quite some time and be able to give people the opportunity to step up to a flagship camera at a much lower price than the newest and latest Alpha 1 Mark II.
Sorry. And then, will we see a benefit with newer and faster CF Express 4.0 cards?
So this is CF Express Type 2. It's not the newer F4, the 4.0, but we're still able to have really great buffer performance. Even though it's 50 megapixels, you're going to be able to get pretty deep buffer performance and very fast recovery from a long burst of JPEGs or even a long burst of raw images. But it's still the same CF Express protocol that we had before.
It is actually something I noticed is the buffer is remarkable.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever filled it out actually. Not that we were, continuously, like I said, spraying and
Yeah.
praying, but still. And let's see if we have any others. No other questions at the moment. So let's just jump back to, I'm curious, workflow-wise for the two of you, lensing. I looked a little bit at some of your photos online, Melissa, and I'm sure you use mostly long lenses. I think you said 600 millimeter before. I saw also a couple of pictures of like up close. Was it like conservation work or rehabilitation? I'm assuming. I saw some bobcat photos, especially.
Yep.
Do you tend to work with tighter focal, closer focal lengths as well?
I mean, when I'm on assignment for magazines, I'll often go to shorter length because I'm doing sort of more of a photojournalism thing, and I'm really telling a
right.
story where I need those wider angle lenses. But I really specialize in birds, often small birds, and in quite elusive wildlife. And so typically, because my subjects are so sensitive and flighty, I really do need to lean on the long lenses, and I really don't want to disturb my subject. Like, that's really important to me. So
of course.
I'm able to really pull back, and I'm often working with teleconverters, and I've been amazed by how well even the Sony 2x teleconverter works. Like, I never had that with other camera brands. And so I lean a lot on both teleconverters, the 1.4 as well.
And I'm sure that stabilization is like
Yeah.
a must.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, yeah.
Great. And then Brian, you're probably in like the portrait range, I'm assuming, mostly, or do you do like?
Yeah, well, my absolute favorite lens over the years for portraits is not an 85, a 100, or 135. It's actually the 24 to 70, because a lot of times I'm trying to either capture an environmental portrait where, 24, 28, 35 is just perfect. The 50 kind of for like a half body shot. And I actually prefer 70 millimeters for a tight portrait because it just seems more intimate. I'm shooting you more from this distance than back way off. So, this lens covers a lot of that in the 28 to 70 range. And then I'll very often pair it with some telephoto, either the 85 1.4 or I really love the 135 1.8, partly because it's extremely sharp, focuses very, very quickly, but it also focuses very close. So it's almost like, to me, it's as much of a macro as I need, meaning I can do a very tight base portrait with it. And it actually has two focus groups that move independently, so it even optimizes the close focus as well. So that kit for me is most of the time I'll almost always take a wide zoom with me as well. The 16 to 35 G Master 2 is always in my kit, but honestly, it's like if you said you've got one lens to work with, it would be, either a 24 to 70 2.8 or this lens right here, a 28 to 70 f2.
One thing, actually, I forgot to mention before, I was going to ask, the auto subject recognition,
Yep.
I feel like that would especially come in handy for you. Did you get a chance to shoot like multiple types of subjects by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much wildlife that I've been able to test here in the city, but what I really love is that auto change that's now in the camera that the A9 III does not have.
Right.
So it's automatically through subject recognition, it's able to move smoothly from a bird to an insect to a human to another animal. And you can also restrict within that auto category to just a couple of subcategories that you're interested in. Like you just want to do birds and animals and forget all that other stuff. So it's got this extra capability now. It's supposed to be 50% better at detecting birds.
It is, Phil. In terms of bird eye autofocus, it's 50% better than it was before. And I feel like it's even more than that because it's just the AI subject recognition gives you so much more power in terms of subject recognition. I feel like it nails it.
I mean, just the other day I was photographing a bobcat in Point Reyes, a national seashore, and the bobcat was moving through this thick grass, and it was unbelievable. This was the A9 III I was working with, and the AI technology in here is even better. But with the A9 III, I was able to just fix onto that eye and just follow it, even as grass moved in front of the bobcat's eye. It just knew where it was moving, and then it would lock back on as when you saw it.
And I think that's the advantage of having the AI chip in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's factoring, it doesn't have to see the eye. It can actually
Right.
factor in.
It's looking at the rest of the
gem-
body
Yeah, where
or-
the body's going and
Yeah.
the eye should be here, the same way as when we're shooting in some of the demos with someone with sunglasses on or
Yeah.
a face shield or
even,
it's
a
amazing.
helmet.
They're like figuring out where the eye should be
Yeah.
based on where the face is.
Right.
But I love the auto switching too because a lot of times I don't pay attention to it, and
Right.
it's like I have on occasions picked up a camera and like, why is AF not working? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, because have it on
I was
animals.
photographing
So
a dog the other
I would
day,
just
so,
basically
yeah.
leave mine on
Yeah,
auto.
and so much in the past, like I'm in Africa and I'm working on birds, and then I'm like, there's an elephant or a cheetah, and now I have to make sure I go in and check the animal, and I don't have to like pull myself away from the camera. I mean, that's why I love cameras like this, because it just allows me to fully do my work and not think about the camera as much. It's doing so much. of
And
that work for me.
it's really smart too. I was playing around a little bit at the beach and like going from like birds to surfers and then back to like a woman and her dog. And it was
Yeah.
like it could kind of figure out, was the dog the main subject if she looked away, or if she looked toward
God.
me, it jumped over to her. So
crazy.
it's kind of making that decision that we would typically go, well, no, the subject's there. It kind of recognized
I mean,
amazingly well what it
And
was.
sometimes we will, of course, want to stick with a particular subject, even if something near it is moving. But I noticed that there's all these extra choices now to really restrict your focus point coming off of something after you have.
Yeah,
really
so
seized
beyond
on
the
it.
subject recognition, you can also set how sensitive the focusing system is, but I'm glad that you brought up the point before where a cheetah walking through grass is like pretty much the ultimate situation, where a lot of the times cameras that don't have this type of subject recognition or that separate recognition unit would be tricked, and you'd see grass, then you see eye, then you see grass, then you'd see eye. So it's able to know that's what you're focusing on, have that recognition, and be able to focus on the eye and not be fooled by other things. And that human pose estimation, to your point, even if someone's wearing a helmet or glasses, will be able to know and estimate where the eye is supposed to be, even if they're in a weird position, because they can see the rest of the body or the joints or the limbs and be able to estimate where it's supposed to be. So that way, it's even better than for birds. It's for humans. It's unreal how good it is.
And-
where I can just leave it on wide and be like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm not offended.
Works,
That's fine.
yeah.
I can let it do it.
Yeah.
I don't feel anything. I'm okay.
And I think the good point that you bring up in terms of the camera being able to track the subject as it moves through, in front of leaves or grasses
Yeah.
or branches or something, I think that's why a lot of photographers traditionally did back button autofocus, where you're like,
Right.
okay, release, there, you got to do
Yeah.
that, and you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that anymore. I mean, I know a lot of people are used to doing that,
Sure.
but the fact is the camera, if you let it do its thing, will continue to track, and you don't have to release, stop, and start. Just let it
Yep.
recognize the subject and
Yeah.
track them.
Makes it easy. It's a lot
awesome.
easier.
It's a great place to kind of end this, but I did have one small functional question about auto subject recognition, which
Yeah.
was, this is like a tech nerd thing of mine. Is there a way to confirm what type of subject it is actually identifying? Because when I had it set in auto mode,
Yeah.
I would go from, I think I went from a dog that we found to a person, and it locked on, of course. But there was some sense of satisfaction that I couldn't find, that the icon would not change based on the subject. So is there like a metadata setting, or does it indicate in some way?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to, but it would be cool that as you move to see an animal pop up, or you see the bird pop up, or you
Right,
see the
right,
train
right.
pop up. I haven't heard that request yet, but I think that would be pretty satisfying to do that, to know you have that recognition.
Right.
So I'll pass that along. I like that idea, but
you.
unfortunately, I don't know if it's in the metadata either, but I can check it out and let you guys know.
All right.
So.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here then in that case. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Wonderful piece of kit we've got here, the Alpha 1 II and the FE 28 to 70 millimeter f2 G Master lens. I know I had a blast with it. I'm sure everyone else here, it sounds like you all had a blast with it. You've had plenty of time with it, right?
Not as long as you think, but yeah.
Yeah.
Probably like a week before Brian. But yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think people think these are sitting around for months, and they're really not. So,
All right.
But it's
well,
just as exciting for me when I get that package in the mail. I'm like, woo. It's like you get that special
Yeah.
FedEx notice. I'm like, okay, I can't wait. It'll be nice. So,
all right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. Don't forget, you can catch our video online on YouTube where we reviewed the camera. We shot a faux commercial with it and did some studio and product portraiture with it just to complement it, kind of an agency-style package that we put together. But otherwise, that's about it. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
watching, and we'll catch you next time.